Hello, and good morning, good afternoon, everyone who have joined this webinar. We are very happy to have you all joining. This webinar is hosted by Preferred by Nature, and my name is Michael Jacobsen, and I will be facilitating the webinar for the next hour and 15 minutes. The webinar marks the launch of Preferred by Nature's Due Diligence Toolkit, which we have developed to support responsible and EUDR-aligned sourcing practices for forest and agricultural products. The purpose of this webinar is to provide you with an understanding of the toolkit, its features and tools, and to introduce you to how the toolkit can support organizations in implementing sustainable and EUDR-aligned sourcing practices using a risk-based approach. Following my short introduction, we will provide you with a thorough overview of the toolkit and its alignment with the Preferred by Nature Sustainability Framework and EUDR requirements. We will present the toolkit structure and individual tools, and we will also explain how we intend to manage future updates and improvements of the toolkit. At the end of the webinar, we look forward to answering your questions, which you are very welcome to raise in the Q&A chat throughout the webinar. A few practicalities. Following the webinar, we will share both the presentation and the recording, which you are very welcome to also further share with your partners. Note that the Q&A session will not be recorded. As mentioned, you are most welcome to ask your questions in the Q&A chat. Please raise any questions you may have throughout the webinar. We will answer as many as we can, either directly in the Q&A chat or during the Q&A session at the end of this webinar. If you experience any technical issues, please send an email to my colleague, Monica. You have the email address here. Then she will do her best to help solve the issue. I'm very pleased to have our leading experts on today's webinar. Christian Sloth, David Hadley, and Timothy Bentner have led the development and the pilot testing of the toolkit and will take us through today's presentation and Q&A sessions. All three have extensive and long-term experience related to responsible sourcing practices for timber and agricultural products, including due diligence practices and risk assessment at regional, country, and supply chain levels. They all also share experience in regulations such as EUDR, US Lazy Act, CSDDD, and of course, EU Deforestation Regulation. In addition, all of the speakers have extensive experience with the actual on-the-ground challenges and methods for implementing responsible practice at the land use level. Before I hand over to Christian and Timothy to take us through the presentation, just a few words about Preferred by Nature. We are a non-profit organization based on a clear mission and vision to support land management and business practices that can enable sustainable practices across supply chains. We do that by engaging in activities across supply chains that supports legal and responsible land use practices. This includes activities that involves all actors in entire supply chains and activities where actors at the end of the supply chains cooperate directly with farmers and foresters on implementing better management practices to accelerate business case for sustainable production. Preferred by Nature celebrated 30 years anniversary this year, and today we work in more than 100 countries across the world, where we engage with more than 5,000 organizations and 800,000 farmers and foresters engaged in managing more than 33 million hectares of farmland and forests. We focus on our expertise and activities within the forestry, agriculture, and travel sectors. This includes all the commodities covered by EUDR, as well as a wide range of other commodities and sectors. We support the transition towards sustainable land management and supply chain through 4 main types of activities, which includes both certification against recognized schemes such as FSC, Rainforest Alliance, and RSPO. We also offer certification against Preferred by Nature's sustainability framework, for example, for products and supply chains not covered by another credible sustainability scheme. Preferred by Nature certification is also applicable for businesses who need third-party verification of their EUDR aligned due diligence system. Through our sustainability advisory services, we support organizations in developing and implementing responsible sourcing policies and practices. This includes support on implementing regulatory requirements such as EUDR. Our advisory services are based on our sustainability framework and supports companies in adopting the due diligence toolkit in their responsible sourcing practices. Our strategic projects activities cover a wide range of projects, including development of the Preferred by Nature sourcing hub that some of you might be familiar with. We see capacity building across markets and commodities as a key part of the transition towards responsible supply chains, and we therefore run a wide range of training courses, workshops, and events to share relevant knowledge. Our training courses and events are announced on our website and via our social media, and you're very welcome to follow them and share with partners when relevant. As part of our capacity building, we are also hosting this EUDR webinar on the 30th of January, where we will be sharing the latest updates and interpretations on EUDR. Feel free to sign up for the event and to share the announcement with relevant partners. On this webinar on the 30th of January, we will cover EUDR specific topics and questions. While at this webinar we have today, we will be focusing on the toolkit and how that is built and supports responsible sourcing practices. So with that, I am pleased to hand over to Christian Sloth and Timothy Bendtner, who will give us a thorough introduction to the Preferred by Nature Due Diligence Toolkit. Over to you, Christian.
Thanks, Michael. I'm going to share my screen here. So, hello everyone. Thanks, Michael, for the introduction. I'm going to start the presentation of the toolkit. There are several parts to the toolkit, and I will hand over to Tim at step 2. So you won't have to listen to me for the entire 50 minutes. Just very briefly on the background of our toolkit here. I mean, as some of you may know, we have had a legality or due diligence toolkit that was aimed at the timber sector and legal compliance under the EU Timber Regulation that we developed maybe 8 years ago. So it's quite an old tool, but we have used it quite a lot. And the current due diligence toolkit that we are presenting today is based partly on the experiences that we have gained from the old version of the toolkit, and of course with our work with the industry and companies that have used the old versions. So it's just a brief note on the background. So Michael touched on this very briefly, but what is it for? I mean, we developed this toolkit to be a tool or support for organizations that is implementing due diligence systems, specifically within the forestry and agriculture sectors. It is aimed at, but not exclusively useful for companies that are inside the EU. I mean, any company anywhere in the world can use this to apply a due diligence system. or implement a due diligence system. And we have aligned the system both with our own standards under our sustainability framework and preferred by nature certification, but also importantly for EU companies and companies that export to the EU, we have aligned the whole toolkit with the EU Deforestation Regulation, or EUDR. So this is kind of the key scope of the toolkit itself. So the toolkit itself consists of 24 different documents, basically, that is ordered within the different steps of a due diligence process. So we have here the step 1 is the system setup. We have step 2 where we can collect information about our supply chains. We have the risk assessment step. We have tools on responding to risks and adverse impacts in supply chains. And then we have some tools that focus on reporting and transparency. So in the structure of the toolkit, we have sought to follow the steps that's in an actual due diligence process, even though I know that the tools may be used not always in that order. But it's just to have kind of a structure to the whole presentation. And as I said, when I'm presenting this, I will present it step by step. And Tim will jump in here on step 2 and present the tools that we have related to information and supply chain management. So our documents are consisting of different types of documents. We have something we call guides, which are guidelines or documents where we describe issues. We also have templates, which are documents that can be used by the user themselves and adapted to a business, for example, a policy template or an Excel sheet where you can enter information. And then we have some procedures which are specific related to some activities, for example, how to conduct a risk assessment, which we call a procedure, because we use them ourselves as well. As I said, we have aligned the toolkit with the EU Deforestation Regulation. So anywhere in the documents where there are very specific contents that are EUDR specific, we have this small flag. It doesn't, of course, mean that this information is not relevant to others, but it is where there are some very specific information about EU Deforestation Regulation. Oh. So for the first step, this is the kind of, even though it's the first step here, it touches on basically all the aspects of due diligence where we have the setup of the whole system. So, and the management overall of the policy or the commitment of the company to implement a due diligence system for responsible sourcing. And the first document here is maybe the most important one in the whole part of the toolkit, or at least the one that kind of contains a full overview of the entire process of due diligence, is what we have the code here, DD01, our due diligence system guide. So that contains a full overview of the whole process. We also have some policy guide here where we describe some key points for companies when in their process to develop their own responsible sourcing policy. And then we have 2 templates, a responsible sourcing policy template and a due diligence procedures template. I'm going to get into the details of each document during the presentation. So this is kind of how these documents are tied together with the other tools and with each other. So as I said, we have the main toolkit with guidance here on all the different steps in the due diligence process. So this is DD01. It's a key document that refers, of course, to the other documents in step 1, but also all the other tools in the due diligence toolkit. So everything is mentioned in the due diligence system guide. So this is obviously where you should start when reviewing these documents. So in the system setup document, that's an introduction to the whole toolkit. It provides guidance to all the other tools briefly, and it also linking the different tools of the toolkit with short descriptions of the process and the role of each of the other tools. So as I said before, this is a key document that should be used as your manual if you want for implementing the due diligence process and understanding all the other tools and the relation they have to each other. Then we have the responsible sourcing policy guide. This is a short document, but it provides some guidance on what the best practices are when developing responsible sourcing policies, and describe some of the different aspects of a policy like this with responsible management practices. And we touch on issues related to social responsibility and environmental responsibility. So these are like the core principles of a responsible sourcing policy. This is then supported by a responsible sourcing policy template, which contains or reflects the topics of the guidance document, but then it can be used directly to develop a company's own policy using this as a template. The last one here in step 1 is the due diligence procedures template, which is basically it mirrors a bit the due diligence guidelines, the DD01, in that it goes through all the steps of the due diligence process. It refers to all the other tools of the toolkit, but it's written as a template that a company could take themselves and make their own document. So yeah, it's a template based on the due diligence guidelines. All right, so the next step in the due diligence process is about how to manage and collect supply chain information and manage supply chains. And I'm going to let Timothy take over. Tim, are you there?
Yes, thank you, Christian.
Great.
Yes, so I will be running us briefly through step 2, information and supply chains. So this step is all about accessing and managing information. So it's about gathering information on supply chains and products. It's about collaborating with suppliers, and it's about organizing information. I'd say it's a rather operational step. So we have 6 tools, most of which are templates. So they're tools that an organization can take and use to supplement or to build their own due diligence system. I will be briefly going over each individual tool in just a moment. Christian, next slide, please. So information management is, of course, a core component of due diligence and a due diligence system. It underpins an organization's ability to identify and assess risks, right? Because to do this, we need credible and sufficient information. We can see here on the slide kind of how each tool is separated, again, in, let's call them subsections of this tool, so this step. So we have the first 3 tools, the supplier questionnaire, the supplier letter, and the supplier consent form, which frame our collaborating or preparing suppliers aspect. And then we have an individual tool for both gathering information and information management. And these are all tied together through the supply chain mapping guidance. So the main guiding document that ties all of these tools together. Yes, I think we can move to the next slide and look at the first tool from this step, which is the supplier questionnaire template. So this tool provides a comprehensive list of due diligence related questions. It's designed to support an organization in selecting suppliers or or onboarding suppliers. So questions are divided into different categories, which we can see on the slide here. And an organization using this tool does not need necessarily to take all of these questions, but there might be some questions that are more or less relevant depending on the context, depending on the supplier. And then, of course, an organization can use this tool to kind of build their own set of questions, which they can then send to suppliers to evaluate how does this supplier or what does this supplier's due diligence system look like? How does it align with what the organization looking at the supplier's organization, what they need? It also contains EUDR specific questions, so questions that are designed to assess certain supply information relevant to the organization's EUDR obligations. I want to highlight that this tool is about identifying gaps and being able to close these gaps. We don't want to encourage that if an organization asks a supplier these questions and a supplier maybe isn't able to answer them or doesn't answer them satisfactorily, we don't encourage the organization to then drop the supplier. This is really about identifying existing gaps and being able to work together to fix or close these gaps. Yes, I think we can move to the next slide, Christian. So now let's look at the supplier letter template. This tool this serves as a way to inform, so an organization can use this tool to inform their suppliers about the organization's sustainable sourcing commitments and the information that they will want to collect from the supplier. So this tool can and should be adapted to communicate the organization's specific ambitions, sourcing ambitions, or due diligence activities or obligations. This is a kind of a two-in-one tool. It contains a generic supplier letter, but it also contains an EUDR specific supplier letter. So this version would then contain, again, EUDR specific information. So communicating to the supplier, we will need this information from you, and this impacts these specific relevant commodities. This tool is best used in combination with two other tools, which is the supplier consent form, which I'll talk about next, and the information collection template, which I'll talk about after. So let's move to the next slide, Christian. We have the supplier consent form, which is essentially designed to accompany the supplier letter. So its purpose is to obtain formal consent from the supplier that the organization issuing this letter will be collecting certain information. So it's basically just to let them know, okay, yes, the supplier agrees that this information will be shared for their due diligence obligations. And again, we have a generic version and we have an EUDR specific version. Yeah, I think we can move to the next tool, which is the supply chain mapping guide. So this is the core informational guidance for this step. So it explains how all of the tools within step 2 can be used, how they interconnect, and how or what their intended purpose is. It contains also kind of let's call it the theoretical background of managing a due diligence system or due diligence in the aspect of information collection. So it contains kind of the core information on what is supply chain mapping. And like with all the other guidance documents in this toolkit, we suggest reviewing this beforehand to kind of get an understanding of how the tools are intended to be used. Let's move to the next slide. So the supplier information collection template, it's quite self-explanatory. It is a spreadsheet with the purpose of gathering information. So with this tool, we want to be able to gather information on suppliers, products, product components, or also material origin. This tool kind of demonstrates practically the foundations of what it is to map your supply chains, essentially. So this tool can either be filled in directly by the organization based on information that they already have access to, or they might choose to just send this tool directly to the supplier together with the supplier letter saying, here, this is the information we would like to collect. Please fill out DD08 so that we can collect this information. I would like to note that a spreadsheet may or may not be the best solution for an organization. An organization might already have systems or software in place which they use for this process. There, of course, it might be more practical to just stick to those. But what this does, it serves as a demonstration on how or what information should be collected and how it can be organized. Especially organizations with long or complex supply chains, a spreadsheet might not be the ideal solution. But I'll talk a little bit more about this in the next tool as well. And yeah, again, this tool also contains EUDR specific information. So for example, due diligence reference or verification numbers, or it contains a space to enter those as well. Yeah, I think we can move to the last tool of this step, which is the due diligence system information management template. So this tool is a spreadsheet which aims to demonstrate how supplier and product information can be managed, right? So now we've evaluated our suppliers, we've informed them about the information we want to collect, we've received consent, and we've collected information. But now this information needs to be managed efficiently. Yeah, so with this tool, we're able to keep track of the different products and the different suppliers and the relevant products associated with them, their due diligence activities, certification status, or also the risk conclusions. So as with many other tools, this tool aligns with our sustainability framework. So the risk conclusions, they're based on our sustainability framework criteria. There's of course also an EUDR. We also have EUDR specific risk or information, and like with all of the other tools as well. Here again, I'd like to highlight that we don't necessarily recommend using a spreadsheet for information management. Again, with long, complex supply chains, it might there is software that can do this maybe more efficiently, but this serves as really as a way to demonstrate how information can be organized, how it can be linked together and built. That being said, it is also possible, and we have seen organizations also using spreadsheets like this to manage the information. It works better where maybe supply chains aren't as long, or where suppliers are constant and don't keep changing. So where the information is entered once and then it kind of remains. And yes, I think that's all I have to say about this. And then I think we'll move on into step 3. So back to you, Christian.
Thanks, Tim. Great. So yes, we are going into step 3 directly here, and this is about risk assessment. So obviously the ability of companies to assess risk relies very much on the information that is collected in step 2, as well as the ability to collaborate with suppliers in the upstream in the supply chain. So in step 3 here, the purpose is to try to evaluate different types of risks in the supply chain for the different products that the company includes in the due diligence system. The first document we have, DD10, is the Supply Chain Risk Analysis Guide, which is again a guide that covers all the different aspects of risk assessment, describes the process in more detail, and refers to the other tools that we have in this step. In the next document here is a template, which is a template can be used to record results of the risk analysis. Then we have some more guidance documents on document evaluation and scientific testing. So these are some guidance on these topics. We have then the procedure and the template for conducting national risk assessment. I'll get to more details on these. And then we have a guidance document, which is quite comprehensive on a guidance on how to assess risks related to deforestation and forest degradation. So this is very much related to EUDR as well. The overview of the processes here is a bit complex. As you can see in the top left corner, we refer to the DD09 from step 2, where information has been collected. So the information from the supply chains are used in the risk analysis as well. The key document here really is of course, the guidance document DD10, which includes like the description of the steps, but also, and again here we have used an Excel template, and even though it may not be used directly in companies' own systems, it's a useful way for us to present and structure data. So we have used that as an example only. Of course, it can be used as a template if companies want to use the Excel, but we understand, of course, that most companies will probably use their internal information management systems. So, but in the risk analysis template DD10A, we have the different categories related to analysis of the supply chain risk, which are being treated and collected there in order to create a conclusion on each commodity and each supply chain. And we do that by gathering data and information from other tools of the toolkit, as you can see on the right-hand side of this slide, where we have mention of the other tools, the guidelines, DD11 and DD12. We have the National Risk Assessment procedure and template. We have the risk assessment guide for deforestation, and also the assurance system evaluation. You will also note here on the far right of the slide, we are referring here to our Preferred by Nature sourcing hub. It's not directly a tool that is developed as part of this toolkit, but it is a very important source of information for the due diligence process. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that as well. Yeah. Yeah. So as I said, the sourcing hub has been a key project for Preferred by Nature for many years. It's currently being updated, and we are also working on developing a more efficient risk assessment process, amongst other, using AI to identify some of the information that's used in the risk assessment. So there will definitely be more updates on this in the coming year. So that's quite an exciting development. But this is an important resource for risk assessment, of course. In our supply chain risk analysis guide, as I mentioned, this is kind of the key guide for this step that ties together the different activities, and it touches on the different topics of supply chain risk assessment or analysis, like looking at data availability, assessing risk of mixing, looking at more general risk categories, how to use national risk assessments. I'm coming back to that. And also to look at specific issues that are relevant to EUDR. The EU Deforestation Regulation have some specific topics or aspects of the risk assessments that is required. So we have tried to cover that directly to align with the EUDR in this document as well. So this is the key documents for the risk assessment step. We have then the risk and the supply chain risk analysis template. And as I said, it's an Excel document that is meant to gather information on specific supply chains. So this is where you could say, well, I'm sourcing this product through this supply chain. I will use this template to keep track of all the information I have, analyze the risk, and have the result presented in one file where you have all the information you need to make your risk decisions. So there is a guidance on each type of risk. There's also room to input information on risk mitigations, and there are also specific note on the risks that are relevant or very specific to the EU Deforestation Regulation. So again, this is a key template for this step. Then we have some guides, DD11 here. This is kind of a shorter document with some tips for evaluating documents. This is something, that's quite important when we get electronic documents. It can be very useful to run different types of tests to evaluate if the documents are correct or if they have been falsified. So there are some tips there for how to spot fake documents and what to do if you find them. Then we have another guide here on scientific testing. It introduces some techniques that can be used, like genetic analysis or stable isotope ratio analysis, which are very specific tools that can be used for different purposes. There are also reference here to EUDR specific issues related to the commodities that are covered by EUDR. There is more detail in this document on timber testing than for other commodities, because a lot of the methods or methodologies here have been tested quite extensively on timber. There's a big body of experience there. So here the DD13 and DD13A is about conducting national risk assessments, and this is really where our procedure for how to conduct a national level risk assessment. So it's quite a technical document. It's something we have developed when we have developed in Preferred by Nature, have developed risk assessment that we are publishing on our sourcing hub. So in reality, we expect that we will publish the risk assessment that we do on the sourcing hub, but we decided that we would include this as a tool in case a company would want to conduct like a full-scale national level risk assessment for a specific commodity, for example, on their own. We have the procedure here. We have the template in DD13A, so it's possible to do that. But so this is very important information that feeds into the supply chain risk analysis that I mentioned before. But again, it's quite a technical exercise that requires a certain level of resources to finalize. And again, we will be posting our results on our sourcing hub. So have a look there before you start developing your own risk assessments. The last document here is the Deforestation Risk Assessment Guide. This is quite a comprehensive guide on how to evaluate risks related to deforestation and forest degradation. This, of course, have some very specific relevance for EU Deforestation Regulation that includes this very specific issue in the obligations. So it has a lot of examples and guidance on different tools that can be used in assessing deforestation risk, like GIS, remote sensing tools. We have lists of databases and other types of platforms that can be used in that process. So there is a guide in there as well for how to conduct this type of geospatial analysis using these different tools that are available on the market right now. I would say this is an area that develops extremely fast. There's a lot of new initiatives popping up all the time that offers like geospatial analysis solutions, and often they promise that everything is solved with their tool. I would just say that, be careful when you evaluate these things, use tested tools, and don't believe all the promises that these new tools always seem to make very often, but be critical when you select and use them. But there's a lot of useful information in this guide. It is quite a comprehensive document. So the last step, let me just, I still have time. Responding to risks and impacts. This is step 4 in the due diligence process. This is where companies should, act upon the results of the supply chain information and the risk assessment results. So we have some different tools in there. It's a step that can be quite complex and relies, of course, very much on the results of the risk analysis that I just mentioned. So we have some different guidance here. The first one here that is the assurance system evaluation procedure. This is also quite a technical document used to evaluate other third-party certification systems. Then we have some guidance documents, something on digital tools, and some guidance on supplier verification and a template that relates to that guidance. So the steps here, as I mentioned, we rely on the risk assessment and the supply chain information to plan and define which steps needs to be taken to respond to the risk. So of course, the type of risks that are applicable to a certain supply chain will also determine what appropriate steps are needed to address those risks. So that's a very important. You cannot make a generic risk assessment process for everything, because the type of risk in your supply chain will really determine the action you take. So let's say you have a supply chain where there are risks of violation of indigenous people's rights at the farm or forest level. That's very different than if you identify that there are false documents in your supply chain. So the risk mitigation measures, of course, will also be very different. So we have here a group of different documents that can be used in, I would say, in different cases. We have the assurance system related documents here, DD13, if there are issues with the use of certified material in the supply chain. We have a guidance on how to verify suppliers' conformance to specified requirements, and we have our and of course also we can use the supply chain risk analysis guide and our due diligence system guide to support this process, because there we describe, as I just mentioned, how to relate your risk mitigation efforts on the results of your risk assessment. So the first documents we have here is related specifically to assurance systems or other certification systems. So this is really it's a procedure that can be used to evaluate other certification systems. So if you are sourcing a product that is already certified, you can use this to benchmark that certification system to ensure that it, for example, meets EUDR requirements. So we have these steps in the an evaluation process that is described in this process. And we also have a template that we have used to do this. I would say a little bit similar to the national level risk assessment, then that this is quite a technical exercise that requires a significant amount of resources and time. It's something we are currently doing both on our own, but also in some of our publicly funded projects. So we have posted some benchmarks of existing certification schemes, and we're working on other benchmarks as well. So look at our website before you start using these tools. If you are interested in going on and evaluating the certification system you are using, just check with our website before you engage in this process, because it can be quite involved. Then we have a guidance document here, which is relating to how to use different types of digital tools. I mean, that could be database, information management systems in supply chain tracking and organizing due diligence information. So it's a guide here. It has some key concepts and some best practices for responsible sourcing. Preferred by Nature is not an IT service provider, so we do not have our own system that we offer, which is why we use Excel sheets, I guess. But we do have here listed some key aspects of what these types of systems should be able to provide, because similar to geospatial analysis, there's a lot of service providers in this area that offers different services and systems. And one thing also to say here is that I think it's extremely important that the due diligence systems is integrated in existing data management system and processes in the organization, so it does not become a detached or a parallel system to existing data management systems. A lot of this, of course, is about managing data and information. So it should, as far as possible, this process should be integrated with existing processes. Still have people coming. Yeah, next. Yeah, so this guide here is a supplier verification guide. This is a guide that can be used whenever there is a need to verify conformance of suppliers. So let's say your risk assessments have identified that there are labor rights violations in farm or forest operations from where the commodity originates. It could also be traceability risks within a processing step. Then it may be an option to implement a supplier verification program yourself, or ask a second party, like a consultant, for example, to help with that. So this guide it's actually based on Preferred by Nature's own auditing handbooks. So it's a best practice guidance on how to manage an audit, really. And in this case, it's just framed around a company auditing or verifying conformance of their own suppliers. So it's a guide that can be used to that. We also have a report template that can be used in alignment with the guide. So let's say you go to a site to verify or audit a supplier, you can use this report template as a checklist to go out and ask the right questions, depending on the type of risks or issues that are going to be evaluated. Again, this template is based a lot on the certification report templates that Preferred by Nature is already using. The last step, reporting and transparency. This is a short one. We have some reporting template and a product statement template that can be used in the supply chain. And really the public reporting template here is a template that can be used by companies to report publicly on their activities on due diligence. And this is actually, it's been developed to meet the reporting requirements directly of the EU Deforestation Regulation. There is a requirement in the regulation for companies to report on what they do in the due diligence system. So this is not the due diligence statement that is used to track products within the EU, but this is a public statement that is used to describe the activities and supply chains of companies publicly. So we have developed this as a support to say what are the different aspects of the due diligence system that should be included in this type of public reporting. We also have a different version which is aligned with the Preferred by Nature certification system, which includes a broader range of sustainability aspects based on the sustainability framework that we're using. So we have two different versions. One that's focused on the EUDR, and then one that can be used by companies that are taking the next step beyond legality and deforestation towards a higher level of sustainability. The last document in the whole toolkit here is our product statement template, and that is really it's a template that can be used to share information about a specific product. It can be used anywhere in the supply chain. It can be used by you to provide some information to your buyer about the origin of the product, about this, let's say it's a timber product, it's a species, the supply chain information, and so on. So relevant information about a specific product can be included in this. It can also be used if you have suppliers that may not know exactly what information to share. You can give them this template. They can use that in order to make sure that you get the information that you need in your supply chain. So that was an overview of the toolkit. I know there was a lot of information, but luckily you have the chance now here to have a look for yourself. So you can scan this website here. We will share, as mentioned before, we'll share this presentation so you have this link. You can then download specific files or individual documents of the tool, or you can download the whole tool at once and have that. We do require that you enter your details there and sign up. Not sign up, sorry. You enter your details, so we have that. You can also choose to sign up to receive updates on the toolkit and promotion of toolkit related activities and other activities that relate to the development and of the toolkit. So you will get this, but you can take a picture of this now. I will go to the next slide in 2 seconds. 1, 2. So just a short word on copyrights. I mean, we do have copyrights of this toolkit, but it's what is called the Creative Commons Attribution Share Alike 3.0 license. So what does that mean? Well, it means that you can get the documents for free. They are free to use. You can copy them, you can modify them, you can publish them yourself. You distribute copies of the documents freely, but we will, it's actually not only appreciated, but you must credit Preferred by Nature and include a link. So let's say you take our due diligence guidance and use it in your own operations and remove everything that says Preferred by Nature in it. We do still require that you credit Preferred by Nature and includes a link to our website on the website. So that is, it's as open source as this can be. You can use it however you like. We just require that there is a a note of credit in the text. Also, if any of you are using this and changing it and making it into a different type of tool, we would appreciate to see it, to share knowledge and information, and we can also learn from how this is being used. We know from our experience with our timber legality due diligence toolkit, we have learned a lot from the way that this has been used by companies over the years. And I know that it has been used quite a lot, and it's been different parts of it has inspired different types of processes. So it's also very useful for us to know how it's used and how you're going to use this in the future. So I really hope you also will sign up for the newsletters to receive news and updates on the toolkit. Yeah, so a little bit about futures. I mean, of course, this is a final version that we are publishing now. We will update it, we will revise it, we will improve it over time. Of course, for the EUDR aspects, there will be ongoing revisions whenever the EUDR changes. If they changes, for example, their guidance, we will update our documents to align with that. So we ensure that as far as possible, we are aligned with any regulatory requirements. We are also looking at developing more direct tools that are aimed at producers that may supply products into a supply chain. So instead of just looking at the due diligence aspect, looking upstream, we're also looking at, should we include tools here that are more aimed at the production level? And the same goes, both for outside and for inside the EU. I mean, there are some specific obligations in the EU Deforestation Regulation related to those companies that produce, for example, timber and place it directly on the market. They also have to conduct due diligence, but it's of course a little bit different than if you have a long supply chain to look at. We're also evaluating opportunities for including other types of regulation, for example, the CSDDD, or regulations on human and workers' rights. So these are opportunities that we evaluate and see if we will and can include in this in the future. There may also be additional guidance for specific topics or themes, which we feel are necessary or people ask us for. So this was mentioned before. I just wanted to re-highlight this, that we do have a webinar on the EUDR on the 30th of January, 1:00 CET. So if you're interested in knowing more about the EUDR, please go ahead and register here.